Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Board. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening and the opportunity to share our story for acquiring this site and our vision for its future, plans for which are recommended for approval by your officers. My name is Brett Smith, co-owner of GB10 Sports. I currently live in Kent, however I've spent over 20 years living in local boroughs of Greenwich and Bexley. Some of my fondest memories of Eltham are during my younger years when I was an academy player at Charlton Athletic Football Club, Sparrows Lane. Before moving to Millwall FC at the age of 14, where I spent the next 6 years playing football at the old Bard Hill training ground on Footscray Road, and enjoyed many years living with local host families in both Eltham and Sidcup.
Good evening, my name is Garry Fiore. I'm a co-owner of GB10. I was brought up in Eltham from a nursery age and later attended Wyborn School, primary school, some 500 metres away from GB10, formerly the Co-op Club, as we all know it. Myself and my family have put everything at risk for the sake of this site and the community, to stop the decay of once a special place and to transform it somewhere for future generations where they can enjoy and call it their own. All we ask is an opportunity to deliver the vision, a safe, vibrant community, a focused sports hub, a place where families can come together, a place where young people can belong to something they can be proud of, their special place, a place where every child has the chance to grow, to develop and thrive in their own corner of a shared community.
Garry and I met over 12 years ago, and we instantly connected through our football backgrounds and felt that there was a gap in grassroots football. Having both had similar experiences with our own local clubs and via our own sons and daughters. We therefore made the decision to create our own grassroots community youth football club under the unedited FC umbrella. Fast forward 8 years, we've created the largest and most successful community youth football club in the borough. All now under the same name of AFC Greenwich Borough. We have over 55 youth teams comprising boys and girls from the ages of 7 to 16. We have over 180 scholarship players in full-time education and football. We have senior men's and women's teams playing at step 5 and step 6 of the non-league pyramid. We have disability teams playing both nationally and regionally, culminating in over 1,600 members from the local area. Over the past 8 years, our number one strategic goal has been to find a home for our members. Our sustainability has become increasingly more challenging across numerous local facilities that continue to become overused, inaccessible and costly. Several opportunities for a new home had been identified over the recent years, however none of them had materialised. When the Co-op ground on Footscray Road came onto the market in 2023, Garry and I both immediately jumped at the opportunity to develop our proposal for the agent. Our proposal was predicated upon our existing community footprint and upon bringing a once former excellent community sports facility back to life. Against a very strong list of competing bidders, including David Lloyd, large housing and property developers, and a large YouTube organisation, after a best and final bid proposal, we secured the Co-op site in December 2023. Whilst we were not the highest bidder, the feedback from the Co-op was that they selected us as the new custodians of the Co-op ground based upon our community and social value footprint and upon our plans that you've seen here today to bring this dilapidated Co-op ground back to life as a sustainable community sports venue. Our plans for the site include provision of both artificial 3G pitches and grass pitches, padel tennis, gymnasium and wellness centre, children's play zone, cafe and hospitality facilities. 3G pitches will intensify the use of the site, which is essential to making GB10 viable to operate. With UK weather, grass pitches can only be used on average of 26 to 30 weeks of the year and only 2 to 3 times per week. 3G pitches can be used 52 weeks of the year, ensuring the long-term sustainability of the club and of this site. Previously floodlit tennis courts are being replaced with floodlit padel tennis courts, and a modern new eco-friendly clubhouse is proposed. It's worth noting, and I believe Beth referred to this earlier, that a previous large pavilion and clubhouse was demolished by fire in 2004. And our ambition is to now reinstate this much-needed community provision. We strive to create an unrivaled community sports facility for everyone. As a community organisation, we're reliant on a blend of grants, commercial finance and private investment. And over the past 20 months, we've secured over 500,000 worth of grant funding for GB10. Over and above our financial commitment at GB10, we currently spend over £17,000 a month hiring other local facilities to enable training and matches of all our football teams. The proposed new 3G pitches will bring our community together into one home and one location. We've been engaging the Lawn Tennis Association for over 2 years. As the governing body for padel tennis, they have provided clear evidence and their support for the once floodlit tennis courts at GB10 to be refurbished as padel courts, which will provide a very important revenue stream. Over the past 22 months, we've started to refurbish GB10 using the funding received and matched investment to refurbish the grass football pitches, provide safe access for visitors, and create a community space including changing rooms, cafe bar, toilets and office space. We're especially proud of our continued growth of our community and social value footprint. So far, we have partnered with local primary schools to raise funds for their respective PTAs via 2 successful fireworks events. We have partnered with Chartwell Children's Cancer Trust, who are located in the local Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and now have an annual calendar of fundraising events. We have partnered with local organisations such as SE9 Nutrition, providing health and wellness services. We have partnered with local suppliers, as an example, New Eltham Butchers, who we purchase all of our local produce from. We're working with local market suppliers and traders to host regular markets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we'll also be hosting our first Christmas markets in December this year. We've also supported a number of local grassroots football tournaments during the summer months. And we're also incredibly proud and excited to be supporting the development of a new wheelchair purposely designed to enable football to be played on grass, having raised over £2,000 so far towards the prototype. We also provide jobs for local people and have already employed our first apprentice. We've worked hard to share our plans with local residents, holding several events, and our door has been open to residents to help understand what their needs and concerns were. We heard from the local community about what they wanted to see in the proposals, from the types of courts and pitches on site to requests for activities to be catered for all age groups. In conclusion, the past 10 years have led us to this moment in time. We have sacrificed our professional careers and often our family lives to provide an unrivaled environment for our players, our parents, the visitors and the local community. The site could have gone to a residential developer such as the local STC Sports Club. Against the odds, we secured the co-op site and have developed an application that will return this community sports venue to becoming a special and welcoming place. Whether that be for a coffee and a croissant, charging your car, use of the gym, play padel tennis, use of the community spaces for local groups to host special occasions, or simply use the new proposed children's play zone. We're proud to have helped so many of our members. Over 80 players have now moved on to professional clubs. Over 20 have secured scholarships in the USA. Many others have moved on into coaching roles and have become young referees. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity to share our background, our journeys, and our vision. Chair, members, we welcome your support and approval in accordance with the Officer recommendation, and we would be happy to take any questions along with our consultants team in attendance this evening.
Thanks, Brett. David, Pat.
Well, thank you very much for coming. You make a very compelling case. for the club and the application. But there were issues raised by residents and members, and I just wanted to go through one or two of those. So would you, firstly, would you undertake that the car park would be permeable and would be landscaped? And would you undertake to provide more cycle parking, as the TfL have suggested is needed, because you're talking about young people here. We want young people obviously to cycle to the venue when the weather's good. I was also going to ask about the footway access. At the moment, it's just depends on an assessment. Would you undertake to provide that? Would you agree to an undertaking to provide that new footway to the new pavilion from the further by the bus stop?
Thank you. So on the footpath, there is already a footpath and a new pedestrian gate that's put in just north of the bus stop. So we have a number of our students arrive in the day via buses, as I think Tony alluded to earlier. And there is a footpath. It's very hard to see, but it's next to, just at the end of where those EV charge in car park spaces are. So there's a footpath entrance there. There's a pedestrian gate and a footpath entrance. There's also a proposed footpath to the north. So if he was entering the site from Eltham, that pathway would need to be completed as and when the site access would be widened and a footpath extended there. If another footpath entrance was required, I don't see why that would be a problem. In terms of permeable car park, I'll probably defer to the consultants on that, but I see no reason why we wouldn't want permeable. I think some questions have been raised around sort of drainage. There obviously is a comprehensive drainage strategy. I think some of the flooding that's been mentioned, we are subject to London clay, and London clay does take some time to drain, which is why we really struggle to use these grass pitches at this time of the year. We have many weekends where we're not operational.
Beth?
Yeah, sorry. While we've been discussing, I was just checking the conditions, and condition 11 does already have a requirement for permeable paving for all hard standing. So apologies, I wasn't clear on that earlier.
Thank you, Beth. And yes, on the cycle provision, yes, I think we've got 2 cycle racks in our plan. So one to the existing buildings in number 9, and I think another one up towards where the clubhouse and the football provision is on the top. I remember seeing that earlier on in the transport plan.
Pat?
Thank you, Chair, and hi, Brett. Right. I don't think there's one person here tonight who wouldn't agree with football, sport, being in the open air, mental health. We all, I'm sure, agree that it is of vital importance to our children and residents and to their mental health and mental well-being. But I'm also here for the residents. And some of them who've had tonight, you will have heard what they've said about the noise from the padel courts and how it's going to disrupt their lives. So my first question would be, what about their mental health? And also, the clubhouses, I don't know whether this is retrospective, but the 2 clubhouses, I'm assuming, were in with this application, but they're already there, aren't they? The 2 houses, the facilities, the sporting, the changing rooms and everything. And I know that in the summer and in the winter as well, that you sometimes have events there. And those events go on, which we've heard, until 1 o'clock in the morning, and therefore they cause some concern. So that, again, you know, are you thinking about the mental health of residents who are affected there? And then when I think about that, again, going back to Green Lane and coming out and this issue of turning left and no turning right, and know the amount of traffic, Brett, that generates at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, when that's going to be the height of when people are going to be using those coming to train for football. I know what the traffic is like round there. But I just think if that traffic is being diverted, which it will not divert it, people will find their own rat run and it will be up Cambridge Avenue. And again, how are those people going to cope? How is it going to affect their mental health? Because there's, as I said before, an area where there is no parking. It's a lovely area, a present of housing. Yes.
Do you want to wind up with your question? Mike?
Do with, I get everything that you're saying. And as I say, I've got 4 grandchildren, and I agree. But I also feel that the residents round there, their mental health, and I know you're going to say it's not, is it possible?
I think,
do you have to have a paddle court?
Pat, I think what we're getting at is that progress shouldn't be at the cost of others.
Sure.
And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at compromises and finding a harmonious relationship between those residents that are there and obviously your commercial enterprise. Yeah. So it's just how the two can blend without anyone suffering a loss.
Sure, thank you for the questions raised. So I think let's focus on padel. Obviously, it's a big focus tonight. So for the last 18 months, we've been engaging with the council planning team. We've had 3 pre-applications and meetings. We've listened to the public through our consultation. One of our early pre-app plans was actually to put the padel first, and the first pre-app was directly behind Inca Drive. And backed on where the bowls green was. We listened to that and we moved the paddle courts then to essentially onto the back of the grass site. So it'd go back of the grass pitches at the bottom and back onto Footscray Rugby Club. So we listened to the council, we listened to residents, and we ended up then moving the paddle courts back to where the previous floodlit tennis courts were. So we did listen, we did consult with the council planning team through 3 pre-applications to look at what those alternatives were. And that was the same with the 3G football pitches in terms of do we put them on the front on Footscray Road where the grass pitches are, or do we put them at the top where they back onto existing floodlights from both Charlton Football Club and Footscray Rugby Club, which are on well past 10 o'clock each night. So we've positioned them over there, back through that consultation process, and I think what's led us to this evening. In terms of padel, specifically, we have engaged and mentioned in our speech, we engaged with the LTA some 2 years ago. They've been down to the site. They commissioned a periscope report, 22 pages if I recall, and the first thing we said about was refurbishing the tennis courts. They said, no, do not do that. It will not be sustainable. This is about making it a sustainable community asset. That report specifically calls that out as evidence-based, based upon LTA members. They also said, and which we've engaged with the sports officers at the council, was they're actually investing into Greenwich's parks and recreation areas to refurbish tennis courts. However, we strongly recommend you do not refurbish tennis, but we would love to see padel in this community. Padel will be accessed by all, and I think Tony mentioned this earlier, it's played by every generation. It's 2v2, it's 4 people. Wouldn't it be great when padel becomes, talk of it becoming an Olympic sport in the not too distant future, for us to be able to offer our local schools the ability during the week for 24 students to come and learn a new sport, be coached by one of our community coaches, and get into a new sport, whereas tennis is very hard and inaccessible. Padel becomes accessible to our local residents, to our local schools, and maybe, just maybe, we have that next generation of someone representing the UK that's played from, that learn a sport in Greenwich. Licensing. Our licensing is obviously a separate matter.
I'm being wary of time now,
Sure.
and we've got a very long agenda tonight.
Sure.
So can we try and keep it on point around planning issues now? Because we're tending to drift. David.
2 questions. One about the status of GB10. I think your colleague referred earlier to this as, he referred to himself as one of the owners, and then you sometimes refer to it as a community asset. I don't think they're incompatible, but I would be interested to know what the status of the company, if you like, that
Sure.
runs it.
Sure. So,
Okay.
Sorry, the next question. Sorry, didn't mean to cut across you.
No, go.
Okay, Tony referred to as a director of football at Greenwich, AFC Greenwich Borough Football Club. So they are a community interest company and they are an 80% shareholder of GB10 Sports. So the community interest company is what essentially bid for the site. And the reason that we created a private limited company was as we got quite far down the line in terms of the purchase, our solicitors and the co-op solicitors suddenly announced on us, even though it had been covered in the particulars, that the site was subject to VAT. So we spoke, we got HMRC advice, we got a sports consultant advice, and does that answer your question? And,
yeah.
And therefore we had to buy the site through a limited company to then mitigate the VAT impact that would have had on a community interest company that isn't VAT registered.
Okay. But I think somebody also referred to it as a commercial business, and I just wanted to be clear about that.
Sure.
Not that I have any objection at all to it being a commercial business, but you do have there are shades there of owners and the Premier League and the FA. I don't know if it's your aspiration to develop that site. The other question I wanted to raise was about. I'm thinking to myself, my God. They're building a paddle centre in Eltham. This is going to be awful. They're going to disrupt people's lives. Is the playing of paddle, you might be able to tell me, Sandra, but is the playing of paddle any noisier than watching a football match? Four people playing.
I mean, obviously, it's simulation through our sound consultant. So simulation of sport has been done for football and for padel. I believe when someone scores a goal and you've got 30 parents on the side, the cheers from the parents is probably far louder than someone playing padel in a group of 4 that scores a winning point to win a set or a match. I don't think I'm professionally qualified to answer that. And obviously, I know the sound mitigation that's been put forward is subject to a condition in terms of reducing that significantly in terms of the decibel level that will be carried to the local residents.
Maisie.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 short questions. One, can you explain a bit more about who will be using the facilities? Like, is it like a membership thing, or how you're going to be sort of supporting the clubs, that kind of thing? 2, one of the residents mentioned that a no right-hand turn had been previously trialled, or was that kind of under yourselves or kind of the previous, or kind of, if you could comment a bit more about that. And the 3rd was about the trees that were cut down. I'm not sure if that was under yourselves, but if you could sort of comment a bit more about that, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Maisie. So members using we haven't. There'll be different types of members and different times. I mentioned earlier that if someone just wants to pop over the road to use the play zone, they will come in and use the play zone. If they want to just pop in and charge their car, because it's cheaper than a high-speed charger across the road in Shell, they'll do that. If they want to pop in for a coffee and croissant, they'll pop in and do that. If they want to use the gym, they'll use that. If they just want to come in and walk the dog, that's no different to how the site's been operated and used previously, and we welcome that, as long as people, obviously, the dogs are on a lead and mess is cleared off and disposed of. So there will be various members, and the way that we'd operate the site going forwards is that the proposed clubhouse between the 2 3G pitches is where our sort of football provision was. We have a safeguarding responsibility, particularly for our students that are on site every day, our 16 to 18-year-olds, so we're able to safeguard their welfare, where they'll receive tutoring and football provision in that sort of north part of the site. The rest of the site down the bottom, which were the existing squash courts that have been refurbed under building regs, is our community clubhouse. So anyone that wants to use all those other services will be free to just walk in and use that. What we're not is we're not a pub. We don't operate as a pub. We're a sports community club, and it will just be for people to use and enjoy. No right turn. We in our I think first year, we have a number of summer events, which are probably our biggest fundraising events. That's where we raise money from community family days and presentation days. And that is challenged with parking. I think any sports club, community club that runs those days will never have enough car park spaces. We've listened, and I think some of the feedback that we've had and heard tonight is one of the mitigation plans that we've got in place is to work with our fellow partners. So we've got the Eltham Oaks across the road. We've got Footscray Rugby Club behind us. We work with those owners and those operators to ensure that when we're running those big summer events, they're not running them on the same day. And can we then utilise their car parks to mitigate that? Obviously, car sharing is something we're always promoting across our groups. In terms of the no right turn, we try to implement that just in terms of some signs and some staff with high vis and done a briefing. It didn't work particularly well because, you know, you're trying to do something where people aren't familiar, but it was to help on the day just to make sure that we didn't end up with upsetting the local residents. So that we've not done anything since. If those signs were left there, we've not done anything since, and that was in the first year during those summer events. On your last point around the trees, I think it was absolutely regrettable. It was under our watch when we had the keys. It was absolutely regrettable, and obviously I think tonight you would have heard that, you know, the mitigation plans we've got in place and the biodiversity and landscape plans that, and all the work that's been done in the background with the ecology consultants has ensured that we're putting some very mature species back on site. I think it was 10 to 1 was mentioned earlier by Beth. We've also been approached, you know, off the not for here, but it's probably worth mentioning as you've mentioned trees. Avery Hall Friends have been in touch because I know they're trying to create a woodland, and this is something that we've only had an initial exchange with Beth and her team, but I think it's the B&G policy where it's that sort of ownership and accountability for 30 odd years. But that's something we would certainly like to explore further. As you know, as part of that B&G would be to work with local parks and open spaces to
Brett,
make sure.
would you talk to Paul McQuinlan? Because Paul McQuinlan mentioned that he's got a keen interest in trees and obviously knew what was going on the site.
Yes.
So you've got, I think there's a number of local experts. I know Tom Wareham is also quite good around the trees. I think he's part of the Friends of the Jackwoods. So you've got local experts that can talk to you about that. Any further questions? Right. I'll go to David first, Pat, because David, then Pat.
Thanks. So there are 2 points here, a bit cheeky. So firstly, I mean, you were talking about people charging their cars and so forth, and these event days you have, but you haven't talked about how you're going to get that modal shift and contribute to the reduction in car use around the borough, and what your ambition is there. I know we've got to come up with a plan in the conditions if we approve it, but I'd just like to hear a bit more about what you have done so far to get people to use sustainable travel and what you intend to do in the future. To reduce car use and get people to use the train, bus, and cycling and so forth. And secondly, coming back to the issues we raised by residents, particularly in Inca Court, I just wondered whether there was whether there could be an undertaking to have some sort of working liaison group with local residents, particularly those the most directly affected. Just as, because obviously I live near floodlights, and but they can be quite invasive, and sometimes they're not. I don't know modern floodlights. We're assured that modern floodlights and so forth, and they can be away from people's, they won't have much of an impact. So there are different views on that, but obviously the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and having that ongoing dialogue would be useful. So you might just address whether there'd be some way you could have that dialogue, should we give approval with the residents in Inca Court, and review the use of the floodlights and maybe the timing and so forth, if it does prove to be a real nuisance to them.
Let me come in on that point. So we've had previous applications where floodlights have been a problem, and when the floodlights have been installed, they've had a collar put around them, so they can only direct the light on the space that they're meant to cover, so it doesn't bleed out.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if your design team could come up with something that would stop any light bleeding away from the pitches or wherever the light is meant to go on.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, our lighting design, our updated lighting design, and again, based upon the feedback and some of the comments, was all of our lighting design is based upon new and modern lighting. Obviously, I think referred to earlier, less lumens, less light spread. And one of the final sort of report that would have been shared through this application process has shielding. So they're shielding that sit on the floodlights themselves. They're raised and lower, so they're not fixed height. They can operate at different heights as long as they meet the minimum standard requirements for lighting the pitches. But yes, they have shielding, referred to as guards, shielding, to ensure that the only areas lit are directly where it's needed for sports safe play to be fulfilled. The car parking and transport, so I think that's been an always-on approach from us, whether we still use these multiple other facilities during the week, and many of those have far more challenges than GB10. So the back of Goals Eltham, as an example, the Goals Eltham has not enough spaces for their 3G, their mini soccer pitches, let alone the grass pitches that we hire. So it's always on in terms of our communication, through our newsletters, through our WhatsApp groups, in terms of car sharing. We've got over 1,600 members on a database, so we work tirelessly to ensure that we're scheduling our games based upon when our coaches are available. So our coaches will often coach 2 teams, so we look at scheduling at home at GB10 on the grass pitches and away from home, and we'll also look at siblings. Parents will often want to watch both their son and daughter or 2 daughters at the weekend. So we try and do that the best we can to mitigate that, and then where possible, promote the car sharing side of things across our membership groups.
It wasn't so, I mean, car sharing obviously is better than people coming in their individual cars, but it was more getting people in the habit of using public transport or cycling. I mean, as we've heard from the chap from Woolwich, I mean, presumably most people are fairly local. I used to go to Roots for Life a lot, so I always cycled there. But, you know, what are you doing and what will you do to encourage people to use sustainable travel rather than default to cars all the time?
I think certainly the bikes will certainly help with 2 bike racks. I think if we're looking at, 30 per rack, I think it was 60 bike racks. And obviously if we monitor that and we see increased demand, we would, needless to say, invest in more cycle racks. I think promoting the local transport network is something that we continue to do. There's 2 buses directly outside the site. We're closer to New Eltham than Eltham, but both are served by the bus route. My father-in-law lives in Sydenham. He would never dream of jumping in a car and travelling to the site. He uses the bus frequently to visit. And I know, and again, I sort of evidence the amount of young players that we have that aren't old enough to drive and that probably will struggle to afford a car in the first place. They're constantly using public transport. So we monitor that across our different sites at the moment. It will be intensified if we were to be approved, but we monitor that and promote that. We also work with our student providers and funding partners that support us providing the education, and we help the students with bursaries. So those bursaries can help them with their transport, they can help them with cycle to work schemes. So we access those types of things as well to enable that and to promote that as best we can.
Pat.
Chair. Can I just ask what's the youngest age of your football players? And I mean, I know that girls as well play football. Well, my granddaughters do, but what age do you take them from, girls and boys? So
they enter into training from the ages of 3 and 4 years of age. They don't actually formally go into teams and leagues until under 7s, which is anything from sort of 6 to 7-year-olds. So we actively promote all those speed, agility, quickness type activities. So a lot of it's actually without football. It's promoting movement patterns, getting them active, and doing that.
Age. I think that would be easier.
Age.
I think it was from about 5 onwards, Pat.
Okay. And I'm not trying to cut you out, but in that case, I know that young mums will bring their children by car, the 3, 4, 6 and what have you, because they have got busy lives. I know from my own So you will
Pat,
still... But can I just... you said that you tried a right turn in summer or whenever, no right turn, and it didn't work particularly well. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, please? Because this seems to be getting lost.
Pat, not relevant. Not relevant to this, because we've already covered the transport. There is not going to be a right. There isn't going to be a right turn. There's already there's a traffic management. There's a traffic management plan.
Yeah, but I'm just asking Brett.
He's
why?
not. We've got a transport. You've got a transport advisor
okay.
here.
Well, why? All right. Why didn't it work then the first time? That's what I'm trying to ask. Brett said that when he tried a right turn, it didn't work. One of occasion.
Stephen?
Well, I wasn't there, and so I don't know the answer to the question. The enforcement of a no right turn would be done by signage or by other means.
Right.
I think, look, in the whole it works, but you're reliant on manual, labour standing there. It's not sustainable. It works on the day for a period of time. We had 500 cars coming in and out the site. I think any site would struggle with that sort of volume. So, as I said, subsequent to that event, which was in 2024, we've not done that since because we've worked with our local partners and we fully encourage, and even at our recent fireworks event, we said there was no parking unless you needed special, you had a disability or you struggled with walking, then we allowed the car park to be used. But that works well because we communicated and people walked to the fireworks event with their children, with their families, and I think that works well.
Right. No further questions from members. Right. Okay. How many historical tennis courts were there on site?
I believe there were 6. It's very hard to tell. We spent a considerable amount of time clearing the site of brambles and old fencing, but it looks like there were 6 marked out. I think historically on Google Maps, I sort of see 6. There was at different levels. So there was 2 directly to the back of the houses on Footscray Road, 2 in the middle, and then 2 at the far end. And I think they were developed
They were
at different
spread
times.
across the site.
Spread in that whole tarmac. Wherever
Yeah.
padel is, they were all spread across that area there, which is hard standing tarmac.
So, what we've ascertained tonight is that padel is a growing sport, but it's also a very noisy sport. I'm looking at the site and I'm wondering. The noise from the padel is causing concern for those residents living in close proximity to the proposal. And I'm actually wondering how essential is 6? Because if you were to reduce that down to 4 or 5, it would then allow scope for a more greener mitigation around the block of the padel courts, which would then help you with your B&G as well. So you could reconfigure the 6 into a 4 or a 5, and then you could surround that with trees, and I would also look to get the soundproofing around the entire set of courts, because you've got a wide open space there and noise travels. Now, if you've got banging, which is probably like, I'm envisaging having a carpenter laying a floor next to my house 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm not going to be too happy. So, again, when I was talking about compromises earlier, I'm just wondering if there is a way of scaling down on the padel courts, because the padel courts seem to be the crux of most of the people's issues tonight, the continuing noise. If there's a way of reconfiguring those courts, maybe reduce them by 1 or 2, and then encasing that encircle it with green mitigation with the trees and bushes, and with the extra soundproofing that you were also looking to incorporate. So if you'd like to give me your thoughts on that.
Sure. The work that we've done with the LTA, their initial question when we started looking at the first pre-application was, why aren't you putting in 12 courts? Our response was, we want to do things right, putting in 12 courts instead of 6 tennis courts because they're roughly half the size. We sort of listened and said, well, actually, no, I don't think that's going to work from a transport perspective, from a noise perspective, and from an ecology perspective. So we did go through that process of actually putting in more courts. The condition that's been imposed is to mitigate all of this noise down to a level that would be less than, I suspect, tennis some years ago when it was being used as floodlit tennis courts day and night on that tarmac area. So I believe the condition in place or proposed will ensure that we reduce the sound and the travel of that sound to mitigate anything that would have impacted previously via tennis.
But everything is hypothetical. And if we were to approve, the genie's out of the bottle, you can't go backwards. Whereas if you were to implement a smaller scheme, you can then make a judgment as to whether the soundproofing is sufficient. I'm just looking at, like, you're soundproofing one side, but then the noise is going to travel into the big wide open space. And we can already hear the football fans and players already in that large void. And I think the noise will travel. The noise will travel because it travels from your club. It's travelling from your club room already. So I just don't see the point of soundproofing one or two sides and not doing the full job.
Sure. No, I think we'd be open to soundproofing all four sides, providing, obviously, I think Beth mentioned earlier around MOL policy, but if that became a condition, I don't think we'd have any real issues or challenges with that.
But then what about scaling down to 5, which would then give you more flexibility with increasing your bio-net gain without having to go off-site?
I think part of this is, I mentioned it sort of earlier during our speech, is we've modelled this lots of different ways and we need to be financially sustainable. We spend £17,000 a month hiring facilities over and above the burden that we have right now with this site. So that £17,000 that we're spending externally will come back on and help us, not pay for those 3G pitches. In order for us to be sustainable, we need to generate a profit margin, which essentially will come from a new sport and investment in padel, which has been backed by the reports and all the work that we've done with the LTA. So that will enable us to be sustainable as a community sports hub. There's a reason, most probably, that Co-op didn't survive with tennis courts, with squash courts, with a bowls green, with a cricket pavilion, with a cricket pitch, with grass football pitches. What are the reasons they are no longer there and why the site falls into dilapidation despite it being sublet to tennis clubs, to bowling clubs, to squash clubs and to other facility hirers? So I think we've had to take a really strong look at this in terms of being sustainable as a community organisation.
So coming back to my point then, you're saying that you would be prepared to cover the entire paddle court site with the soundproofing. Callum?
I think it's just worth reflecting on what could be the unintended consequences of putting some screening on all four sides, which is you could have some sound then reflecting back. So I don't know, Beth, I think this is something we would need to be guided by the experts with respect to sound.
At this moment in time, I'm asking the question, would you be prepared to put the noise mitigation around the entire site? Because the two flanks that are not covered are the ones that open out into the into the open void where sound will travel.
But that could reflect sound back into the residents. So I guess
it won't, because the other side. The other side.
Chair? So I guess the question I would maybe say to Beth is, if that were to be a condition that we were minded, if it would be something we would be able to phrase in a manner that was flexible enough such that it maximised the noise mitigation, so that we did not inadvertently, for I think the best of intentions, Chair, contribute something that could actually make the situation worse rather than better.
If I could come in. I mean, the way that condition 50 is worded at the moment, basically before any works commence, the details have to be submitted of this acoustic screen, and it doesn't specify that it's only on two sides. But what it does specify is that it has to achieve a certain noise level at the neighbouring properties. So if by putting it on two sides it doesn't do what it needs to do, then it's going to have to go around 3 or 4 sides, and maybe it even needs a roof on it. The main crux of the condition is that the existing prevailing noise levels 1 metre.
Sorry, Bev. So basically what we're talking about then is if required, it's going to become an enclosed building. So if you're going to put a roof on it,
if it needs to meet that requirements of the condition, then
so if that roof is what required, would it then come back? Would it come back to before committee?
No, well, no, I mean, so as I raised earlier, the issue of putting an acoustic screen around all sides had potentially an impact on MOL, but I think if through discussions tonight members are comfortable with that position, then we can kind of take that forward as officers that acoustic screens potentially have to go around all 4 sides, and that's part of the condition.
Okay, everyone got that? Right, okay. Any further questions? Gary, Brett, thank you very much.
Thank you.